I want you to get together.
Hard stop. We're just talking, you know?
Yeah, so I'm going to try and quickly explain why we have a clown today, first of all. Like, how did that even happen? Where does it come from as a Western phenomenon? Okay, so commedia dell'arte movements was something that came out of the Dark Ages, predominantly through the 1600s. Okay, that's when it became popularized. The commedia dell'arte was a traveling troupe of mainly Italian performers that came out from the collapse of Rome in the 500 AD. They had to travel all throughout Europe because they weren't allowed to perform in Rome anymore because of the rise of the Catholic Church and the stamping down of performance arts because it was considered something of the devil. So this roaming troupe of Italian performers traveled all throughout Europe, as far as Russia as well, basically putting on quick, improvised shows with stock characters. Throughout that 1,000 year period, coming to the 1600s, they had solidified their stock characters. The rich old man, the daughter of the rich old man, the military man, the servant of the rich old man, and this other weird character called Harlequin was introduced into the later
Mhm.
editions around the 1500s. Okay, coming out, it was quite a new edition, but they had picked it up from examining this popular character everywhere, all in every European culture. They had this thing called a wild man tradition. It didn't matter where you go. You can go to Portugal, all the way down across to Romania. They all had the same tradition. They would dress up like these crazy, colourful, hairy beasts with huge, wide, teethy grins and horns. And then they would have a crazy party where they would get absolutely smashed. And then they would fast after that period. Okay. Massive excess and then a period of fasting. And the character they would dress up as was the wild man, a Nephilim creature, basically. It's their ancestor spirit veneration culture. That's the Europeans' version of it. It's older than time itself. If you actually type in the cookery, there it is. Yes, ERI, yeah, cookery. So this is their version of the Wildman tradition. Still happens today. It's actually one of the most comprehensive, still as it used to be traditions. It's barely changed, but they dress up like this basically. And this is what a Harlequin is based on. This is where the Harlequin character came into the Commedia dell'arte. Type in Portugal. Let me just quickly get it up on my screen so I can get the name of this. The Ceretos, Ceretos. It's extremely popular, happens every year around the Lent period, massive festival, their version of the Wildman tradition, and they are extremely psychedelic in the way they do it. But it's the same tradition as you find in Bulgaria. It's identical. There it is. That's what they wear. That's their version of the same thing.
It's kind of okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they burn an effigy of a giant version of it at the end. And this represents the devil. They make no secret of that. There's another one, the Lazarus, next to it, the one where they're wearing white and they wear the devil horns. If you just scroll down a little bit,
Oh,
you see
yeah,
that one.
right there.
That's a neighboring town. That's their version of doing the exact same
It's
thing.
not creepy at all.
Yeah, exactly. And they're always associated with bells, big multicolored fur pattern clothing. It represents the demon, the devil, devil character. And what they do
It's
is
just
they embody
it's
that character for one night, do loads of crazy, excessive, horrible stuff, highly sexually charged stuff, alcoholic inducing, drug inducing, ritualistic stuff while possessed by the demon, and then they let it go and fast. That's their yearly veneration ritual of something ancient, the ancestor spirits.
I mean,
And
it sounds like Fat Tuesday and Lent in
it's it's
just a
it's
general
it's
description.
all linked together with that. All the timing's the same. Yeah, a lot of these
Yeah.
cultures got Catholicized throughout Europe,
Right.
and got linked with these pagan traditions, got linked with Catholic
Right.
traditions, and it becomes this big thing. But you'll find actually all throughout Europe, this is a thing. The wild man is everywhere. They all have their own version of this. Okay, so what the
Yeah.
Commedia dell'arte did was invent a new stock character and put it into their shows called Harlequin, who was named after Helikins, which is the French version of the wild man. It's from this specific story that they have from the 11th century, where a monk claimed to see Helikins and his band of roaming demons going through his village, and basically he's a giant with a club, and is covered in hair, and basically has this little band of merry demons that follow him around, basically, and he causes havoc wherever he goes. So Helikins is where Harlequin gets its name. It is also mixed in with the Italian name of Arlecchino, which comes out of the Bologna region of Italy, and that character is based off of Dionysus, other Mediterranean gods like what's his name, Mercury with his caduceus and his staff, Dionysus with his thyrsus with the pine cone on the end, his staff. You got Helikins, the giant wild man with his big club over his shoulder. So Harlequin is this psychedelic looking monster thing with a club, which is the staff. And he can do acrobatic tricks like backflips, and it looks like he's flying on the stage. He's so fleet of foot and amazing. And he plays the demon character. Yeah, and this is who he's based off of. This is where it comes from. So literally, the first insertion of the first jester ever into theatre was based off of the Wild Man, which is based off of the Nephilim. So it literally is a direct representation of Nephilim creatures.
It's reminding me of Genesis 6 conspiracy book. There was an obvious attempt of these fallen gods, watchers, Nephilim spirits, taking over the seven sacred sciences, and they're taking over art here in a very obvious way. And I mean, it's been going on forever. It's one of those things where, just a reminder to folks, you being connected to some spiritual past, whether it's pagan or Judeo-Christian, it's not possible for you to disconnect from that stuff. Even if you're like, oh, I'm a science man. Well, guess what CERN is doing?
Yeah.
Okay. Guess what all of these, why are we naming all of our rockets after gods, and our planets after gods? It's inescapable.
It's funny, actually, when CERN started first doing its thing, that's when the clown sightings happened in 2016, same time.
I was going to ask you that sooner. I was going to ask you that because the whole idea is, if we're opening up these portals through our scientific experiments, quote unquote scientific experiments, you would expect a lot of different things to start happening during that time. And I do believe not just clowns, but there was a lot of sightings in the areas of CERN where people started seeing a lot of mythological sightings of werewolves, their ancient deities, of the that ritual that they did before they opened it, and it's like all of these like pagan god visions people had. It was like opening up a portal. It reminded me of a scene from Hellboy where they literally opened up a portal to get Hellboy into our world, and using blood sacrifice, and it's just so much there where I'm like, dude, this stuff has been happening for thousands of years, and it's just re-enchanted in a different way.
I think the Gothard tunnel opening happened around the same time as well, and that ritual was literally wild men coming out of the portal that they just opened.
Right.
So it's the same story. I think they have done something. I mean, I think the whole idea of pushing things like the Joker in the media, for example, today is to popularize up until a Halloween period the idea of people dressing like the famous new clown idol. It's always the Joker that gets pushed, or some clown serial killer gets pushed. I think the Terrifier clown is one of the popular ones this year because Terrifier 2 came out, who's like an extremely murderous, brutal clown serial killer in the film. So brutal, in fact, people have passed out in cinemas watching the second one, apparently. It's really gory and disgusting and just horrible shock horror. But he's Art the Clown, he's called. He's this black and white patterned clown. And again, it makes people, when these films come out, it's always just before Halloween. And they think, oh, we're spooky season. Why wouldn't they bring it out around Halloween? But what they're actually trying to do is get people ready to dress like it during that period of Samhain, which the Celtics understood was when the veil is thinnest between our realm and the spirit realm. It's Samhain. If you can get people dressed like clowns in time for Samhain, you can get people ready to be channeling unknowingly demons, basically. It's opening portals.
And there are people who would say, "Oh, then we shouldn't do anything with Halloween." But it almost sounds as though they succeeded in creating a cultural event that is the perfect mask for all of the events. Now you can travel from site to site for like 2 or 3 weeks, all dressed up as something horribly grotesque, and no one even bats an eye anymore. It's just this massive cover for something. Because I know, like, little kid that wants to dress up like a pirate and just play around, like, that feels so innocent, but what better cover than to have everyone be used to everyone dressing up in horrifying things for weeks on end. There are people who start doing this kind of stuff in October.
Be dressed like Nephilims and ancient gods, pretty much without even knowing.
But you would think you're just dressed like a clown, which is fun, right? It's just a bit of innocent fun. But this is another thing as well. And so, the entertainment industry has always been linked with the clown. And this is the point I was trying to get to, So the clown, first of all, like I said, Camille Delarte, Harlequin. The clown character comes from the same show, but if you type in Pedrolino, 1700s or something like that. Pedro Lino, as it sounds. This is the first clown. This is the clown as we've first had it in the commedia dell'arte. This is where the character first comes from. And you'll find it's nothing like we have today. It's not even the same thing. Like, it's not even close. Pedrolino wore an incredibly boring, plain, white, loose servant garb. Nothing special, okay? You can get pictures of it up. Just boring, plain white. Nothing. There he is. That's the clown. That's the first clown. When Harlequin was first introduced, that's what the clown looked like. That's the servant of the rich old man. Okay, so as it developed through those 200 years up until the 1800s, France kind of developed a sad sack clown, like you see there, Poirot with the red with the black pom poms with the face paint, you know. But he was a loser. He was like everyone laughed at his expense because he was so pathetic and couldn't get the
Mm.
girl. The girl wanted Harlequin, didn't want him, you know. Harlequin was the demonic, evil, cheeky character who waved his staff around like it was a penis, just, you know what I mean, like poking people with the backside. He was really rude and crude and demonic. He could change the scene by slapping his stick, the slapstick. He had magic powers. He was a demon. That's the point. But then as time went on into the 1800s, up into Britain with the pantomimes, he became something else. He became like a boring, doting, lovesick fool who was always just chasing after the daughter of the rich man Columbine. And he lost that edge. He didn't really have that edge anymore, you know. He developed into this fine looking, tight leotard, ponce, fancy dandy lad of about town rather than the evil, demonic, hairy wild man he once was. His mask wasn't the hairy beast mask anymore. He became like a sleek Venetian mask, you know. And you can see progression of Harlequin throughout the centuries, and you can see it change, you know. He didn't always wear a tight garb like that. He used to wear a really loose patchwork thing full of tufts of hair originally, but he became this thing here, like a very fancy, a kind of fancy image, you know, of Harlequin. So there was kind of like a hole in the whole process, like a void needed filling. Who's going to be the demonic, cheeky character now if it's not going to be Harlequin? So they kind of made a switch. And it happened around the time period of the 1800s when Joseph Grimaldi was on stage, and he kind of was a really great performer. People loved him, you know, and he was just making his breakthrough on stage for the first time. His father was a great performer before him. People knew who he was. He was a known entity. He just embodied the clown so perfectly, and he made it his own, and it became this more demonic, cheeky character. So to kind of match this, there was a switch in costume, and that Pedrolino costume you saw, which was boring, plain, and white, which is the servant of the rich man, became what it is today. And the person who did that, who made that change, don't forget the costume hasn't been changed in hundreds of years. It's a big deal. You know, it was a big deal to change the costume of a clown. Who's ever heard of such a thing? You know, it was for the time it was like, but we've always done it this way, you know, why would you change it now? And he changes it to the most psychedelic looking crazy monster you've ever seen in your entire life. Look up like 1800s clown costume. It's nuts. It's more terrifying than what we were today, right? It's just shockingly scary. And this was it. This set the new standard from this day on. And the person who made this change was called Charles Dibdin. He was the son of an extremely prolific Freemason and music writer, songwriter, theatre writer, performer of the day. He was like a music industry mogul, a huge deal in the music industry of the day, Charles Dibdin Sr. His son, no, the apple doesn't fall far from the tree, did a costume change when he took over the theatre where Joseph Grimaldi was working, this superstar, and dressed him like this. When he used to dress like Pedrolino, like I showed you earlier, his boring white garb. Where the hell did you get the inspiration to suddenly make them dress like this? Where does that come from? It's so incredibly far removed from the original thing, you know. It's and they never talk about where it comes from. Well, it's clear
Yeah.
if you look into it, it's clear where it comes from. They had a lot of ties to India. During this time, it's when the East India Company was getting its foothold there, the British colonization of India, you know. And a lot of people, a lot of British people, especially rich, influential British people, were traveling back and forth to Calcutta and living there, you know, and soaking in the Hindu philosophies and religions, you know, and the iconographies. And they brought back with them the image of a Kalasungsang demon or a Rakshasa demon. They brought it back with them, and they dressed this character of Pedrolino, the clown, like a demon to fill in the new role which was replacing Harlequin, who was also originally modelled after the European demon, with the clown, and the switch was made. Clown would now be the demonic role, and he was dressed up to look like a Hindu demon specifically.
There you go.
There you go.
That it just starts connect. I mean that opens up a whole nother set of questions now.
Well, get
And
this, guys. I only just discovered this for myself after I made all these connections. Someone sent me a random message saying, "Oh, check out season 2, episode 6 of Supernatural. It's about a killer interdimensional clown entity, and when they're looking into where it comes from, this particular demon, some woman says it's a Rakshasa demon." From Hindu mythology. She actually says it in the thing. And I didn't know any of this until like 2 weeks after I make my own connection. Somebody, and this was in like 2006, they made that episode. You know what I mean? They made it years
a little
ago.
bit of the history, and I think it's also important the etymology of names, the words used to describe these clowns. Like you said, Harley Quinn, and where that came from, and you said it was more. What is it,
Helikins, based after
And
the
I
French
wouldn't be
version.
surprised if it's connected to, because where we get the word hell from is
Oh,
from
yeah.
Helena and all that stuff.
Oh,
And
yeah.
there's obviously probably some connections there. But you mentioned music, and Mav, you brought this up.
Mhm.
The official song that we know these days that is used to intro a clown, that it sounds goofy and stuff like that. But I think, Mav, you're the one that said that when you looked it up, it's actually not meant. It's actually a very
Oh,
serious song. It's
yeah,
not.
it's the title of that song is Entry of the Gladiators. It's meant to be this really powerful, triumphant sort of thing. The warriors enter the stadium. And what we get is now, I mean, at the time, I don't know, it would be interesting to hear someone or from that time be like, oh, yes, this is the most triumphant sound for entering warriors. And it's turned into clowns. Like we think of it and we think whimsy and insanity. In case someone wants to hear, we can this. I don't know if you could hear it. Could you hear it?
Yeah, you could hear it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's that sound. It's like it's supposed to be this triumphant kind of thing, and it's now become just the weird whimsy of clowns entering into the circus.
Mhm.
And so it's almost like a circumvention, and it goes along with what you were saying. This character, those established characters from the theater, they're this one character that basically was usurped. He was overtaken by something else,
Mhm.
right? Whether it was this entity or whatever that it's supposed to represent, it overthrew the original picture and became something different, which I don't know, maybe at the time that totally changed what some of those established stories had been.
Mhm.
You now change that character. Now does that overthrow all of these other storylines and all these other thoughts and things? Like I don't know. I don't know what those would have been, but to take an established character and to change it over that way had to have some sort of cultural effect.
Yeah, well, it was like I saw that switch over from the clown Harlequin being replaced by the clown as just an attempt to repopularize the demonic within theatre, because Harlequin stopped being so demonic. He became more human throughout the centuries, and they needed to introduce a new demonic character, so they hijacked Pedrolino and turned him into the clown. And what the clown became was the cheeky demonic character who would go around poking fun at everybody and causing chaos and mayhem. I mean, a pantomime, the Harlequinade at the end of the pantomime was literally just 2 hours of straight Looney Tunes chase scenes. It was just Harlequin steals the daughter of the rich man and runs away. The clown and the rich man chase after them, and that was the whole show for 2 hours. Just
With
crazy,
yakety sax playing and
yeah,
it's just
crazy,
yeah.
wacky antics just to get the daughter back, and for Harlequin to snatch the girl, And the clown played his role as like his version of the clown was like not a very good servant and didn't really care. Like he was kind of he was always just having fun with it. He didn't actually care whether he got the daughter back or not, type of thing. You know what I mean? But along the way, he'd have some fun while doing it, which was cause torture and mayhem to everybody around him, basically.
Right.
And Joseph Grimaldi really popularized this clown his performances were so great, so prolific in the minds of those who witnessed it, that it became the cultural standard from then on of what clowning should be and how they should dress. He popularized the image, and then it became what we have today based off of his work, you know. So,
Right.
and if you think about it, you know, the son Freemason was involved in that early moment. You know, the son of a Freemason was sent to a theater, took over the theater by virtue of his second name. You know, he was a Dibdin. Of course he's going to get to run the theaters, you know what I mean? His father's the most famous musician of the time. It's like, whatever. So it was nepotism at its finest. But the apple doesn't fall far from the tree, you know what I mean? And Charles Dibdin Sr. actually was the first person to coin the phrase circus. He invented the name circus. He worked with Charles Hughes, who was a student of I can't remember his name now. This general who started his first equestrian, like he didn't call it a circus. He called it like an equestrian amphitheater or something like. It was horse tricks. He would ride around in a circle on a horse and do backflips and handstands on top of the horse. Well, his students went away from him and basically created just across the road his own circus where he did the same thing. It became his rival, and he teamed up with Charles Dibdin, and they called it the Royal Circus. Charles Dibdin introduced that name circus to describe a ring-based performance involving horses and clowns. Okay, so Freemasons have literally been a part of this since the very first inception of the circus and the clown. They have not been separate from it, and then you'll find throughout history from there they travelled to America, started the big top circuses, which were travelling circuses. And then you'll find it was relatively quiet for a long time until about 1870s, 1880s, when P.T. Barnum got involved. And he was
I want you to get together